Oh, hey, I'm talking to you on my dumb phone. Let me make sure I stay close to the mic this time. All right, I'm officially 2 weeks into the dumb phone experiment of 2025. It is slow, it is inconvenient, it makes life harder, and it is still a total relief. So, what I'd like to do is share some observations from the first 2 weeks of going all in on the Light Phone 2 as my primary phone for text and calls. Also, how I've modified it to keep all the benefits of a smartphone while maximizing all the benefits of a dumb phone. Some great things that have been happening, some stuff that makes me rethink this, and just generally how the experiment is going 2 weeks in. So let's see. I took some notes, and it's worth mentioning that and pulling up this binder because the dumb phone doesn't have notes. So already one of the first things I do to streamline and optimize my thinking got broken in this whole thing. So I usually take a lot of notes on my phone, which syncs to my computer, which I then copy and paste into email or LinkedIn or all the stuff that I'm doing for work. And so right away, I didn't have that convenience of just popping onto my phone and jotting something down in notes. That is an interesting loss of convenience. But maybe one of the ways I'm thinking about this isn't the point to be less convenient, which just hear me out. I know we want things to be convenient, and that makes it seem like we'll get more done and then we'll have more time and all that stuff. But I'm starting to question the reality of whether or not we actually get more done and feel happier with all this convenience. I think it could be a lot like convenience food, where it seems like a good thing, but once we work it into our habits, it actually just makes everything worse, right? It's like fast food all the time, but for our brain. I'm sure someone's made that comparison already. So, some really cool things that I like and that make me want to keep doing this forever. First, I wrote at the top that having the dumb phone has been a beloved inconvenience. And I just want to sit with that for a second because that really summarizes everything that's been going on. Like, it's been very inconvenient and it slows things down. I'm not texting people as much at all, but that's kind of the point. It made it more inconvenient to text people. And so instead, if I really needed to talk to them, I would call them. I think that's a pro. And if I didn't really need to talk to them, I just didn't, right? And isn't that the point? Isn't overall, at first that's inconvenient and frustrating. And then I realized that's the point. The point is to do that stuff less so that I live more. And it really made me think of Oliver Berkman's 4,000 Weeks, that book, about how what's really going on is that we try to optimize a lot of things that are inefficient and bad for us anyway, when the real productivity tip is to embrace the fear of missing out and the FOMO and just accept that you will miss out. There are hard things that we'll miss out on, which is interesting because it makes me realize I probably couldn't have done this as conveniently at a different stage of life. Like in college, I think this really would have affected my social life. Texting was a bit more important, like when you're meeting up with people at bars or you're in text chains and stuff like that. But as it is, I'm really just texting with family, often with my husband about like a task or a reminder or something, or with friends to meet up with. And so in all of those situations, either it's very convenient to send a quick call about the time or the place where we're meeting, easy peasy, or maybe I just send fewer texts to my husband with reminders. And so I found like the quality of the overall communication has improved because I'm not engaging in that relationship over and over again and like chipping away at it. And that was one of the first things that I found that was really interesting that I wrote down, is that I had more to write because I wasn't saying it through texts or on my phone or in notes. When I sat down to do my journaling at the end of the day or the end of the week, there was more to say. I hadn't exhausted all of that information already. And I thought that was cool. And with that, there was more to say to my spouse, which is really cool because we're 13 years in, married, dating for like 5 before that, I think. And it gets to a point, as one of my favorite podcasts put it, you're just angry coworkers at the daycare. It's like you get into that mode. And I found by using text as a way to send instructions or requests or updates and stuff, by cutting all that out, it made it more fun and more mysterious to talk to him at the end of the day because I hadn't been like sending information and updating. And I get that that's more inconvenient. And that's not to say that some people aren't going to be better off texting, but at least for me and what we've been trying to work on as a couple, having more to say and being more engaged in our face-to-face stuff was really cool. And I put a note on that as it's kind of like the mental containment of life and information. It kind of fell into more natural buckets instead of being pushed through texts all the time. And if you think this is overthinking, it is. Another phrase that kept coming up when I thought about this was like we're learning a lot about how we have leaky guts from the stuff that we're eating. And this really made me feel like I had a leaky psyche. And it was like these moments that maybe in the past, like in high school before smartphones, my brain was intact. Like the barrier between my brain and what's happening outside the world was intact. With a smartphone, it just creates these little punctures and it's just always there's information flowing in and out. And I think that could be what was causing a lot of the like frenzy or anxiety or like sense of always being on. I think that's a big part of it. So it's a leaky psyche. And the more I get into stuff like fountain pens and art and stationery and phone calls and face to face stuff, the more I can feel those patches kind of closing up and you just feel more whole. Like there's more of a clear, healthy barrier between me and the way the world is interacting with me and the way the world is coming at me. Overall, the most important thing, the most important benefit has been that sense of not being on call with my phone. I don't know why, and it makes no sense. I'm not here to say that it makes sense at all. But even though it's more complicated to have two things, my brain is happier. Like my brain is less complicated because I know the only thing that has me on call that's truly important is this. And so as long as this is nearby or in my pocket or whatever, I don't actually have to go and check anything or do anything. And then this becomes a tool that I go to when I have something specific to do. And I just find that to be such a beautiful, natural organization that I didn't have when this had the notifications and all the extra stuff. And so I'm going to say some embarrassing things right now. I used to like add stuff to the Target cart while I was driving, like check LinkedIn, check email, do all this stupid stuff. I might be driving and remember I needed to send a payment to someone for something that they did for me that week. And I would do it. And it's like all of that stuff is just not an option anymore. And obviously that's safer. Like, who are we kidding? That's way safer. But B, it also like it fragments my day less. Because when that thought occurs to me, I can't act on it right away. So it just gets filtered and put back onto a list in my head. For some reason, that hasn't been stressful. I haven't forgotten anything. It's just that I can now be more present, like to every moment. It's nuts. Another pleasant surprise is that Google Maps works offline. So as long as you're near Wi-Fi when you put in where you're going, it actually tracked and kept up with GPS while I was driving. So I thought that would be a huge problem. It's really not. Another great thing is that this can be a hotspot and it's very easy. So whenever I did have, let's say I was out and about and I really needed to transfer money through my banking app, I could just turn on the hotspot, do it on the phone, turn it off and be done. Again, inconvenience, but a blessed inconvenience. And then also same for Target pickup, same for using like the Whole Foods app to scan when I'm checking out groceries. It allowed me to use like the best parts of the smartphone without having my smartphone have the potential to send me urgent messages at all times. Again, I'm not going to pretend I understand why this works. I know it is stupid to carry this and my other phone. So far, I have brought it with me at all times. I think that's the first phase. I want to have it just in case because like the very first weekend, I think I mentioned the car wouldn't start. So it's like I needed to have that with me because all of my insurance, connectivity stuff and calling a tow truck, like all of that is on my phone. So I have had that with me. But the difference is I might bring this with me and leave it in the car. I might just not even look at it. I might take it out and snap a photo and then I'm done with it. The mental space this has taken up, it went from 100 to like 3%. I'm seeing at least like a 97% increase in mental space just from doing this. Another pleasant surprise, music and music around the house. Like you just download the songs that you want to hear. And I find this is so corny, but it makes you more present to what you're listening to. I don't love having access to 5.5 billion songs. For a lot of people, it's an abundant wealth to have all of these options, but I find myself paralyzed by that. I'm really only listening to 4 or 5 albums at a time, so I just download it and it's good to go. It works in the car, Bluetooth works around the house with the Apple devices. It's great. Yeah, I'm trying to decipher my own handwriting, but it says audiobook for chores. And so again, it was cool. I just used that, downloaded it to the audiobook. Another benefit, I found I've been reading so much more. What'll happen is now I just leave this out of the mix and I go and do the bedtime routine with just this and my Kindle. And I've read like 4 more books over the past 3 or 4 weeks, shorter books, but still, like that's fantastic. All right, that's the pros and cons from this. Now we've got my notes in the app. Just along with the texting, it's like I rarely choose to text now unless it's super important or unavoidable. And I think what that does is it puts a whole new rubric on whether or not it's worth picking up my phone right now. And before, it was always more convenient to just pick up the phone, blast the message, move on. And I think that convenience wasn't very healthy. I don't think that was working for me. The main complication that has come up, which actually led to a fight with my husband, is iMessage. So I don't know if Light Phone 3 fixes this or if there's some other workaround I'm not considering, but that is the biggest problem so far. If you have close family or partners using iMessage, right now what we've done is my husband made a Google SMS number, and that's what we text on outside of working hours. And then while I'm at work or at a computer or on Wi-Fi, then I'll use our normal iMessage. And so it does kind of fragment. We have this one conversation going on with iMessage where I can send links and images and stuff like that. And then the SMS, which really can't. And that could lead to some frustration. Certainly for my husband, like that's disruptive to how he receives and sees text. So we're still working through that. Another cool thing though is, so the way you set it up is that this is your primary. And so this gets your 2FA authorization, like password stuff. And it'll show you that you've received a image. Let me get a picture of that. But you can't actually see the image because it's e-ink. All right, so what'll happen is that you'll get a cute little box like that that says photo. And so I can't actually see that on this, but you can set it up so it automatically forwards to email. So I don't miss messages or links or whatever. I just can't see it on the phone while I go. And so again, in another time of life, even just with early kids where we were sending baby photos all the time, I think that would have been more of a deal breaker. Whereas now, again, that bar of what I'm missing versus what's distracting me from being present, that bar for me is so high that I really kind of don't care. Maybe it's more antisocial, but if being antisocial gives me more peace, I'm willing to make that trade at this point. And so it's just been awesome. And so while I was sharing this, some questions came up from people. One person asked, they looked at reviews, but they said it's small and slow, which does seem like it could be part of the point of using a light phone. I know I'd need to change my expectations of how easy or nice it is, but is it frustrating beyond the set limitations? I think that that's exactly the point. It is small and slow and inconvenient. This makes it less convenient to do the thing I don't want to do. And isn't that just the basis of habit forming, right? You create an environment where it's harder to do the things that you don't want to do and easier to do the things you do want to do. And I think that is just coming to terms with, is this worth the sacrifice that you want to make it less convenient? To make it a huge pain in the butt to write 3 sentences. Another thing to consider though is that this does have voice to text, and I've used that a whole bunch. So it has a full QWERTY keyboard that you can work off of. It's pretty great, but there's no autocorrect, so you do make mistakes a bit more. And then right on the side, there is a microphone button, and that'll pick up your text. And I found that to be very accurate and very good. So I use that probably half the time I'm doing that, especially if it's more than one sentence I'm trying to write. But again, what this does is it kind of pushes your phone back into communication tool territory instead of lifestyle tool. And I think that's what I was after. So if that's an uncomfortable transition, that might be a reason to not do this. The other part of the question was, I definitely identify with the reasons you laid out in this video. Have you read Stolen Focus? Reminds me a lot of Hari's points about how we can't just say personal accountability when we have machines designed to addict us on our persons at all times. Yeah, and that's what I come back to a lot, is just whether I can make sense of it or not. Like I really get that this doesn't make sense to add a device to make things easier. I get that it doesn't make sense, but for some reason, this has cut off that tractor beam that was keeping my brain just frozen on the phone. And maybe by cutting off that first initial tractor beam step, it cuts off all the rest of these bad habits that I have. Like maybe that's what's going on. But I still just find such a level of relief from having phones and calls come through this. It feels so simple in some weird way. I'm just still going to study it. So one benefit, I'm reading more. The other benefit, I'm taking out like my art journal and working on that. And then when people ask me about the art journal, I can say, hey, beats scrolling on my phone. And everybody agrees with that, at least to my face. That's just been really cool. So maybe if you're trying to decide to do this for yourself, maybe do a written audit of how you use your phone throughout the week and think of how it might be interpreted with the dumb phone that you might choose. That'd be cool. So far, I thought one of the features I'd take advantage of is taking out the SIM card and switching them back and forth. I haven't found the desire to do that even once. I think the hotspot is the real determining factor here. So I would recommend, if you don't already have that or don't think of that as a feature, I would totally stick with that, because that made it much easier. And it kind of turns this into an iPad. Might be how I'm thinking about it now. If I need to snap a few photos, I'm certainly taking fewer photos, but I don't feel like I've missed any special moments. This just became a camera and iPod for me, and I really love that. It stopped tracking screen time. Otherwise, I would give you a screen time update. But the health app still works. Email, kids' photos, stuff like that. This all works just great. As it is, I absolutely want to keep this going. The only maybe is if it affects, my personal life too much, as far as my husband's experience of texting and calling with me. So we'll have to see about that part. But otherwise, I'm just really pleased and I'm really grateful I could try this. So thanks for weighing in. It is so nice to know I'm not alone in being weird about my phone and thinking about how to do things differently. So if anybody else is trying experiments with this, I'd really love to get your take of what you're doing in the comments. So thanks again for listening. I'm really grateful.